Hi, I'm Xin and I'm from the Department of International Business. I am introducing Triplenomics today. I am Xin, who majors in international business. Today I am going to introduce Triplenomics tariff wars to you. Under the America First policy, a strategy of reciprocal tariffs hits one of its most important trading partners, Taiwan. Today, we break down the policy, examine alternatives, analyze the key economic graphs, and evaluate the welfare effects on both nations. Let's dive in. First, a tariff is simply a government tax on imports. It's used to shelve domestic industries, boost revenue, or correct trade imbalance, like protecting U.S. factories from what are perceived as cheap Taiwanese goods. In U.S.-Taiwan trade, reciprocal tariffs mean America mirrors barriers faced by U.S. exports or targets specific surpluses. Taiwan's 111 billion trade surplus with the U.S. made it a prime target. The policy became reality in April 2025 when an executive order slapped a 32% tariff on many Taiwanese exports. After 4 rounds of intense negotiations, this rate dropped to an interim 20% in August. Critically, some semiconductor components were partially spared for TSMC's new U.S. manufacturing plants, but talks continue to push that rate even lower. Tariffs are not the only trade tool. Let's compare them to quotas. While tariffs tax imports, letting the market naturally contract quantities, quotas are hard caps, a legal limit on import volume, which spikes prices via artificial scarcity. Governments usually prefer tariffs because they generate cash for the treasury. Quotas, on the other hand, often create a bigger economic waste. They lead to quota rents and lost revenue for the government. They might be chosen for very tight control, but tariffs generally allow for more efficient, L-based tax trade. Now for the core economics, starting with the U.S. market view. Under free trade, the flat world supply line set the low world price. At a price, U.S. imports fill the gap between the high quantity demanded and the low quantity supplied by domestic firms. When a 20% tariff is added, it shifts the effective supply line up. The new domestic price soars to price W plus T. At this higher price, domestic factories expand their output to QS prom, consumers buy less at QD prom, and imports crash to the smaller difference. Notice the government revenue rectangles and the inevitable deadweight loss triangles that represent lost economic efficiency. Flip to the supplier's perspective in Taiwan. The U.S. tariff is a cost. It doesn't raise the price Taiwan's exports receive. It lowers the demand they face by the amount of the tax. The U.S. demand curve effectively shifts down by T. Taiwan's exporters are forced to accept a lower price for their goods to remain competitive in the U.S. markets. Their total exports tend to QE prom. This crushes margins, especially for their massive information and communication technology sector, which ships over 70% of its outputs to the U.S. What are the final welfare stats? In Taiwan, consumers are mostly untouched since this is an export-focused tax, but producers are hammered. Output is down and jobs are at risk.
Hi everyone, I'm柯巧沂from College of Community, and my student ID number is 104405176. My topic today is TSMC as a dominant producer in the advanced chip market. You might already know that TSMC manufactures over 90% of the world's more advanced chips. From the smartphone in your pocket to the servers training AI models like ChatGPT, modern technology relies heavily on this one company. Today, I will use economic theory to analyze TSMC's market power, its unique cost structure, and the challenges that lie ahead. So let's begin with the monopoly model to understand TSMC's decision-making. Unlike a firm in perfect competition, TSMC is a price maker. To maximize profit, they identify the output level where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Once this quantity is set, we look up to the demand curve to determine the price PM. As you can see, PM is significantly higher than the marginal cost. This pricing power comes at a cost to society, represented by the triangle, the deadwood loss. This area illustrates the loss of economic efficiency. Furthermore, the recent AI boom driven by NVIDIA and others has shifted the demand curve to the right, effectively pushing both the equilibrium price and quantity even higher. Now, let's examine the costs driving this production. TSMC operates with massive fixed costs. Constructing a single fab costs billions of dollars, not to mention the price of EUV lithography machines. While their variable costs like silicon wafers and electricity are significant, the key here is economies of scale. Because their fixed costs are so high, as TSMC produces more chips, their average total cost drops rapidly. This creates a natural monopoly. This is simply too expensive for smaller competitors to enter that market and match TSMC's low average costs. So, is this profitable? Absolutely. The shaded rectangle represents TSMC's economic profit. It is calculated by taking the difference between price and average total cost, multiplied by the quantity sold. In a standard market, such profits would attract new entrants and lead to the graph in the right. However, TSMC sustains this in the long run due to high barriers to entry, specifically the superior yield rates and technological lock-in. Competitors face higher cost curves, making it difficult for them to compete profitably. And let's move on to their global strategy, expanding into Arizona, Japan, and Germany. In economics, the long run is defined as the period when all factors of production, including capital, are variable. Building new fabs is a classic long-run decision. Strategically, these massive investments act as a credible commitment. They signal to the market that TSMC intends to maintain its capacity leadership, which further discourages potential rivals from entering the race. Finally, what does the future hold? What if competitors like Intel or Samsung successfully commercialize 2-nanometer technology? We will see a shift in market structure from a near monopoly to an oligopoly. This would fundamentally change the game. TSMC's pricing power would diminish. Instead of setting prices independently, they would face strategic interdependence. Every decision would depend on the reaction functions of their rivals, shifting the competition from pure capacity to an intense technological arms race. And to summarize, TSMC is a textbook example of how high fixed cost and technological leadership can create a dominant monopoly position. However, as they expand globally and face rising competition, we are witnessing the market dynamics slowly evolve. And this is my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Anian, and the Chinese name is Li Anyun, and I am a student who study Arabic language. Hello everyone, today I'm gonna introduce the topic of negative externality, and I take air pollution as an example. What is externality? Externality means irrelevant third party was affected. For example, health hazards is a kind of externality, and ecological and environmental damage, and economic cost such as worker must take leave because of sick. These are all externalities. And we would ask, who produced air pollution? In the past, especially Industrial Revolution era, producers are the UK, the US, the global north countries. But now, producers are developing countries like China and countries in Southeast Asia or African countries. And who is the victims of air pollution? By definition, the victim of air pollution is irrelevant third parties such as you and me and neighboring countries. And now, developed countries who are really devoted themselves into decarbonization would be the victim of air pollution, and other company or other people who is not generate air pollution, but they also need to bear the cost of this such externalities. And how does air pollution lead to market failure? Because air pollution generate negative externalities, so the company doesn't pay the social cost. So their so the firm's equilibrium quantity would be greater than the social optimal equilibrium. So there would be a deadweight loss. So that's why air pollution leads to market failure. Then next we move to graphic analysis. Everyone can see this black supply curve. It is the original the sum of firms' supply curve. And this distance is social cost. So if we incorporate the social cost into account, then the actual supply curve is the blue one. So we can see the original quantity is greater than the social optimal quantity. And we can see the gap between the social optimal supply curve and original supply curve. There is a triangle. It is deadweight loss, and it represents the inefficient. Then we move to question to consider. Why market produce too much pollution without government intervention? The answer is very simple. Because firms do not have to pay the cost, they are not held accountable for any kinds of externality, for example, health hazard, nor environmental damage, nor resource degradation. And who gains from the externalities? the firm gains the externalities, and the consumer who buy the product also gain the externality, but it would only in the short run, because simultaneously these consumers are also bear the cost of externality, and who lost. Basically, as long as you need to breathe, you have to bear the social cost. So basically, the society and the consumer, and including that we just mentioned, and all the people who need to breathe bear the cost of externality, so they lost. Then we move to how to correct the market failure. Basically, we have two solutions to solve this problem. The first is command and control policy. Basically, command and control policy means standard. Government will give you emission limits or technological standards, such as every company can only emit 10 tons of CO2, or all companies must use the same carbon reduction machine. The advantage of such policy is that they are clear and simple, and perhaps you can see direct effect of this policy. But the disadvantage of this policy is that such policy is inefficient and inflexible, because companies that need more carbon capacity must comply with the same standard as those that don't. And such policy also do not have incentive for firms to reduce pollution beyond the legal standard. Then we move to the second solution that can correct the market failure, which is corrective taxes. And the ways that how to impose the corrective tax is also really important. You have to make the tax equivalent with the social cost. Your original equilibrium will become the social optimal equilibrium, or your original equilibrium will still equivalent with the social optimal equilibrium. Then we move to the real policy example of how to correct the market failure. I take carbon border adjustment mechanism as an example. The implementer of such mechanism is European Union. Basically, it means countries in EU will impose a fee or tariff on the imported goods based on the greenhouse gases emitted during their production. The effectiveness, then we move to evaluate its effectiveness. Such policy would encourage global partners to raise environmental standards and prevent carbon leakage, which means firms will relocating production to countries with weaker climate rules. It's very good, but practically it's hard to implement because carbon measurement is complex in different countries. So it is very hard to have a standard that every country accept. So in conclusion, the policy is very potential in the long run. It presents a really good prospect, but it is just it have very restricted effect in the short run. Then we move to extending thinking. The first question is, can international cooperation like carbon markets or climate agreements serve as a Pavlovian mechanism? In my own opinion, because I am also a student from international relations, so I will answer this question by what I studied. I would say, ideally, it is possible, but it is as ideal as League of Nations. People expect that every country is willing to cooperate, but as mentioned previously, the fundamental problem of air pollution is that emitters are not required to pay the tax. So it is very not have an incentive for the company to deal with this problem. And the international system does not have a central to deal with air pollution as well. Even so, such as United Nations, the arbitrator is still very inefficient because we have to ensure the sovereignty. We have to ensure the sovereignty of each nation. We can't just tell the China and said, you can only emit 20 tons of carbon of CO2 this year. It is nearly impossible. So also because country leaders have very low willingness to cooperate, and we can observe this from US withdrawal from Paris Agreement, which is the most important agreement to deal with climate change and to deal with air pollution. And the second question is, suppose pollution affects neighboring country, how does it create an international externality problem? Okay, my answer is air pollution can drift with monsoon to neighboring countries, and over time, this can lead to a decline in the country's productivity due to poor public health. Also, environmental quality is a global public good, so pollution can harm ecosystem, and every countries want to free ride, so air condition will be worse and worse. And that's all for my part. Thank you for listening.